Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Elevate Your Running podcast. This is Coach Sarah, and we are back. It is 2026. We have a brand new year ahead of us, which is always very, very exciting. We also have a brand new episode today. Carrie Jackson is back with us. Hi, Carrie. Welcome back to the
Hello.
podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Hi. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. We scheduled this months and months and months ago, after we recorded our first episode together, which was episode 189, which was all about how to elevate your mindset. And Carrie is a mental skills coach, and she goes through all the different ways on how to elevate your mindset, especially when you're going into a really tough training season, you're going into a tough race, maybe, or a race that makes you a little bit nervous. So we talked all about that. And one particular area we talked about at a very high level was visualization. And after we had that conversation, we both kind of said to each other, like, oh, this would be really cool to do this again.
Yeah.
Let's deep dive on visualization. So that's what this episode is for. I think it's an incredible episode to kickstart the new year because I think, as someone who has dabbled in visualization, and I know I probably don't do it the quote unquote right way, I think it's highly, highly, highly beneficial for all runners to be able to incorporate into their running, into their training at some point during the year. So we're going to talk about what it is, why it matters, how to achieve a strong visualization in your training and in your racing, the benefits to it, and if there's any drawbacks. So, with that, let's just get right into it. So, Carrie, what exactly is visualization?
Yeah. So the visualization, which is often also called mental rehearsal or imagery. Visualization is basically the brain's ability to either create or recreate images in your mind. But when we're using visualization, it's in an intentional and directed way, right? So it's a little bit different than like a daydream, which you can have a daydream and it kind of can go off in different directions or it sort of spontaneously happens. So this is visualization is it's similar in that you're creating, like, these images are coming into your mind. So it's not something that's actually happening outside of you, right? It's just something happening inside your brain. So it's similar that way, but different in that visualization is used for with intention for a specific purpose. And it's either going back and recreating images that we've experienced or creating new images that we would like to experience.
Wow, that's incredible. So, how does that translate to a runner who's gearing up for, let's say they're gearing up for their training cycle? They have a spring half marathon on the books. What is kind of the first step that they would do to kind of deep dive into that?
I Part of the tool of visualization and how you use it is going to depend on what it is that you need, right? So if you're about to go into a big training cycle and you're gearing up for that cycle in preparation for a race, there's a lot of different applications that you can use visualization for. So the first piece you kind of want to assess is like, oh, okay, well, are there any aspects right now that I feel like could be fine-tuned, or are there any aspects I'm struggling with right now? So an example of that is, like, one way that I'll use visualization with athletes sometimes is if you're finding yourself having a dip in your motivation and having a hard time going to get your workout in, sometimes we'll do some visualization to see yourself there. So let's say, as an example, like the only time you can get your workout in is after work, and you get to the end of your day and you're feeling it and you're like feeling the pull of just wanting to go home and like, I do not want to go get my run in. So in those situations, what you could do is take 2 minutes, even like at work, and imagine yourself putting on all your running gear. Imagine yourself getting out there and feeling incredible and feeling strong. So you're seeing it in your mind and planting that seed, which can sometimes help us overcome inertia, right? Of like, okay, I can imagine it now. And what you're doing is like you're imagining how great it would feel instead of the thought that comes of like, oh my God, how good would it be to just sit on my couch right now instead of get out in the cold and go run? So that's like an
Yeah.
example of like, oh, okay, I could use visualization for motivation in that way. But there's so many different applications of it. So part of what you're wanting to do is to assess like, oh, okay, well, what needs do I have right now? Or what am I struggling with? Or what do I want to fine tune? And is there a place for visualization to fit that need? Whether it's like building confidence, actually working on technique, or using it for motivation. There's so many different uses of it.
That is so cool because I've always thought of it as a means to an end on an outcome goal. I've only quote unquote visualized, and maybe there's more daydreaming involved than visualization when it comes to my race outcome and visualizing how I want to feel on the course, how I want to feel running race pace, how I'm going to show up in like the last, let's say, K of that distance. What am I going to do? How am I going to feel? And so I've done that side of things in training, but I haven't necessarily for myself or even for athletes that I've coached, worked with them in terms of, oh my gosh, if you are struggling with consistency, let's visualize what it looks like if you are consistent.
Yeah, yeah. And I think to your point too, like one of like the powerful pieces of visualization is that your brain is creating images of what you want. And so oftentimes the way that we think about our goals is we're thinking about like things that we hope happen or things that we
Yeah.
don't want versus things that we do want. So what we want the brain to do basically is to be able to see if you want to experience something in your life, you have to be able to see it here first. So if you can't imagine it, right, like if you can't see yourself crossing that finish line, feeling the way that you want to feel, if you can't imagine it here, it's not going to happen in life, right? Like you have to believe in that possibility, and creating that imagery in your mind helps lay that foundation, it helps lay that neural pathway of like, this is how I want to feel. And imagining, the reason it works, like one of the reasons visualization is so powerful is that when you do visualization, you're literally using the same neural pathways as if you're out there running on race day. The only difference is that the motor skill is blocked, but all of the preparatory pathways that you would use when you're actually out there are exactly the same. So that's one of the reasons why we call it mental rehearsal, because you're literally strengthening when you practice in your mind, you're literally strengthening those preparatory pathways in your brain. So it's a really great way to lay that foundation of like, this is how I want to feel. This is what I want to experience. This is how I want to feel in those situations. And so not only can you use it to imagine yourself accomplishing your goal and strengthening that belief in your ability to do that, you can also use it for seeing yourself expertly navigating setbacks during the race and getting through those setbacks with resilience and practicing your response in your mind, and strengthens that pathway, so that then if it actually happens, you're more likely to do that. That becomes your default setting because you've already practiced it.
Absolutely. I think I'm very, very guilty of only thinking about the positive outcomes when I'm visualizing.
Yep.
And that doesn't always set me up for success, right? Because when things shift and change during a race, you have to be able to respond and be able to be confident in the decisions that you're making at that point to continue moving forward. So, how does a runner visualize like some of those setbacks that might come up? Is that something that
Yeah.
they have to think about of all the different things that could happen? Or is there like one way that they can kind of channel all of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that and I think sometimes athletes hesitate to do this because the
Yeah,
thought process is, oh, if I think about something bad happening, I'm going to make it happen.
right.
And it's sort of almost like superstitious type thinking. And so usually when that happens, I say, it's so great that you think you're that powerful, but that's not how it works, right? You can't just think that and magically make it happen. So it's because we're afraid. We don't want to think about the worst case scenario, right? We don't want to think about the things that might go wrong. But when we do, we actually prime our brain for resilience, and you prime your brain for problem solving and looking for solutions instead of panicking when it happens in the middle of a race. So what you would do, like a really great approach for using visualization for setbacks, is to think about your upcoming event and think through all of the critical moments of your race, right? So you outline. So a critical moment is basically a specific moment during your event where it's almost like this is the race right here. There are moments where things could potentially break down, or you could potentially take a hit to your confidence, and you're wanting to identify what are those critical moments and where does my focus need to be in that moment in order to get through that moment successfully. And when you do this, like, so I actually have athletes like put pen to paper and we work through all their critical moments, and we look at literally where does your focus need to be in that moment. And then what's the cue we're going to use to get it there? Like, a mantra or a physical cue or a visual cue. Like, are you going to write something on your hand that's like, ah, that's where my focus needs to be right now? So you come up with that list, and then you visualize your ideal response. Like, once you have those, like, even if you just do that, you just look at like, what are all the potential obstacles that could get in the way of me accomplishing my goal, and visualize how do I want to ideally respond in that situation. And then taking the time to actually visualize that and seeing yourself responding to that situation successfully, that's what helps to prime your brain for resilience and for problem solving. And so your brain has gotten the message like, oh, so even if you didn't think of all the scenarios, you've done this process enough that you've primed your brain for resilience and for problem solving. So it goes like, oh man,
Mhm.
I didn't expect this one, but I'm going to find a solution because I know that I can. So that's like the easiest way to kind of utilize visualization for setbacks. Will say there are two. So visualization is a skill, and in order for you to really be able to benefit from using this mental skill, you have to be good at visualization. And the two pieces of that, one is how vivid are the images I can create in my mind, and am I able to control those images? Right. So the reason I bring that up with setbacks is that sometimes like people will visualize a setback and they see it completely, like everything derails, and it doesn't go at all the way I want it to, and I don't even know why I'm racing. Right. So, and because visualization is so powerful and you're building a neural pathway, if you can't control the images, you're not ready to use this mental training drill. You have to practice the skill, and there's some ways to do that to be able to get good at the skill of really clearly seeing those images and controlling them before you want to take it into something like working on setbacks.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's so interesting too. So, in training, we are training our bodies, right? We are getting ready to go and we're getting our bodies physically ready to do the task at hand. And oftentimes we don't necessarily train our mind, right? So I'm seeing this as like a really great way to also exercise the mind and get it
Yes.
primed to react and respond in a positive way if something were to happen either in training or on race day that is totally outside of your control. What are some of those cues that an athlete and runner can work through in training to be able to create that vivid picture and that vivid imagery that they need in order to show up and execute the way that they want to on race day?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. One is that you really need to know what it is that you want, right? Like, so being really clear with yourself on what is it that I want to be able to accomplish here, so that you know the appropriate cues and what it is that you're working towards. I think the other thing that's really interesting that I'm thinking of as you bring this up is I just did a webinar this morning for 80/20 endurance, which is like Matt Fitzgerald's company, and and I was working with the coaches, and so I asked the coaches like, well, what percentage do you think is, when you look at performance, what percentage do you feel like is mental versus physical? Right? And almost everybody said 90% mental, and one person
Yeah.
said it's 50% mental, and then the other 50% is also mental. Right? Like, so everyone's saying like it's really high, and I said, okay, that's great. I said, sometimes like the ones I get the most are 90% mental, or 50/50, and then there's always like different ones in between. And I said, even if we say it's 60% physical and 40% mental, I said, okay, so let's play with those numbers. I said, okay, so now tell me percentage wise, how much of the training you're doing with your athletes, like how much is the athlete training the physical versus training the mental? And they were like, huh, well, I'm saying it's 90% mental, but we're training 100% physical, right? Like, so I think
Yeah.
that's the other piece, right, that you're kind of alluding to with this idea of like visualization is you also have to believe that this is worth doing, right? So before we even get into the skill of any of it, it's like you have to believe that like, okay, even if I'm saying it's 40% mental and I'm not training and I'm training 0% mental, that's a problem. That's a really significant percentage that you're leaving up to chance. So what comes before even doing the work is the belief that like, oh, I need to be training both. And what do I do for that? And then it's being able to see like, well, what do I want? So then I know like here are the cues that I need to do in order to make that happen. And then it's like, how do I set it up in my training plan? Like, how do I set up visualization in my training plan so that it's just seamless? So it doesn't feel like something extra or I have to like remember to do it. It's like prescribed. Just like oh, I'm running intervals today and I'm doing, 5-minute visualization.
Yeah, that's really important. It's something I always encourage athletes to do is just sprinkle the visualization in your training, and it can be just a few minutes every other day or every day. And last year I had an incredible team of athletes all year round, and some in particular ran the California International Marathon in December, and two of the women very specifically worked very actively on their mindset. So we were training the physical body, right, with marathon prep work, marathon workouts, marathon long runs. And they were both a little bit different in how they approached it. One athlete had action goals of what she was going to focus on and how she was going to get through the hard moments in each workout and long run. And the second athlete decided at the very beginning of the week that she had a theme for that week and that was going to be her focus. And so it just kind of bled throughout all of her runs. I
Hmm.
would assume that everyone has a different approach to how they kind of tackle it. Is that true?
Yeah, you kind of have to know your own operating manual, so to speak, right? So
Mhm.
I like the way I think of it sometimes like some of us are Macs and some are PCs. And each are fantastic, but they have different operating systems. And you need to know what your operating system is, right? So I
Yeah.
love that story because it's like you know, for one athlete, one of those might work brilliantly and the other would not work, and then vice versa, right? So it really is about knowing what do I need in order to perform my best? Like, how do I need to feel emotionally? Because so much is run by emotions. Like, how do I want to feel emotionally? And what have I noticed that are my optimal emotions when it comes to optimal performance? And then what do I need to do to get it there? And those are two very different tactics, right? And
Yeah.
so you have to know which of those tactics is going to work best for me. Because for some people, really having everything dialed in and outlined is going to help them focus and stay tuned into their goal. For another athlete, that might feel like it creates pressure and anxiety and it works against them, right? So you have to know what's my operating system and what's the appropriate tool to use.
Yeah, and I think for everyone listening today too, it's important to know that like it's a trial and error, just like everything, right? So
Yep,
it's maybe you don't know right out of the gate what's going to work best for you, but it's like
that's right.
trying something, seeing if it works, give it time, give it grace, and then kind of flow through and kind of change it if you need to. What would be um what would be a good way for an athlete to kind of incorporate intervals and visualization at the same time? Could you kind of walk us through what that looks like?
Yeah. So one way to do that, let's say for you doing intervals. So one way to do it is you could do it before, right? So you could spend a couple minutes before the interval. And there's a couple ways to do this actually with running. So some of the research shows that like if you're able to time your visualization to the exact time of what you're doing, that's very beneficial. That doesn't always work with running and endurance sports, right? I'm not going to have someone spend hours visualizing if they're running a marathon. So, but for intervals, you could potentially do that. You could potentially even set a timer on your watch and visualize yourself running that interval, feeling fantastic, feeling strong, feeling confident for the set amount of time that the interval is. That said, with running, you don't have to do it for the exact time because that's not always realistic with endurance sports or with running in particular. So you could just spend a couple minutes before, and really kind of getting grounded in and sort of breathing and taking a minute to close your eyes. And one of the things that helps with seeing them visual or vividly is using your senses. So imagining like, what do I hear in the background? What are the sounds I hear? What do I see? Is there anything I feel? Like, do I feel like, how does the ground feel under my feet? Do I feel a breeze? Right. So those things make the images really vivid. And so you
Mhm.
can just spend 2 minutes seeing yourself perform the way that you want to perform. So that's one way to do it, is before the interval. You could also do it during the intervals, and it's a little bit different, right? So obviously you're not like closing your eyes, and you don't have to close your eyes to visualize either. You can kind of keep them softly focused. If you're as you're actually running, a fun way to use visualization is you can use your imagination to like either be the right the imagine that you're trying to catch up to someone, or imagine that you're trying to hold someone off, whichever one you feel like gets you to run faster. Because I have athletes that it's different for everybody. Some of them, they're
Hmm.
like, I don't like thinking about someone behind me, it feels like too much pressure. And other people are like, yeah, this guy's not getting around me. Right. So whatever works for, or like, I want to catch up to that person. So you can, like, as you're running the interval, imagine that happening. And that's another sort of application of visualization.
Mm.
Some of my athletes, instead of doing that, they like to visualize themselves as like, imagine what it would feel like right now if I was my favorite runner that's like a fast, strong runner, or an animal. I had one, he imagined one athlete, his legs were pistons, so they never got tired. Like there was no, so that was his visualization. So you can kind of play with those types of images and that type of visualization while you're actually doing the interval.
That's incredible. And it's so cool to think about because our mind really does dictate so much. And whether we tell ourselves we can or we can't, we are absolutely right. And I've seen some of the most like strong, fit runners go into either a training block, training cycle, a race, and because their mind was scattered or they were so nervous about what was about to happen, they completely fell apart. So this really
Yeah.
does move the needle, I think. I think there's a huge benefit to visualizing. Is it something that an athlete needs to continue to do year round? Is it something that also changes with each type of training cycle that they're in?
Yeah, so you can do it year round, right? Because it is so, your mental skills are similar to your physical skills in that the more you practice, the stronger they get, right? Like so when you're building physical fitness, if you're, training for like a 10K or a half or a marathon, you're not going to do 1 week of training and then be like, "All right, sweet, I'm ready to go." Right? Like you have to
Right.
continue to build. So same with the mental skills, right? So there is something to like doing it consistently and building the skill. That said, you can also do your mental skills with periodization, kind of similar to your training plan, right? So there's different times where you're in a building phase, or or you might be in a recovery phase. Like the same goes with your mental skills. So if I'm working with an athlete and they're in a recovery week, we might also take time off from the mental training, right? So you get it because it takes energy to do the mental training. And so you want to think about like you can use you can utilize that concept of periodization and apply it to your mental training also, where it's like, oh, this might be the time where I'm really going to dig in on my like practicing the visualization to build the skill, and then getting close to the race, I might be visualizing, how I want to perform during, or doing like specific things with visualizing the your setback routine and that sort of thing. So you can do it year round in terms of like maintaining fitness, so to speak, right? So
Yeah,
that you don't
right.
lose it, but it's okay to take breaks from it too.
Right. Yeah. You complete your A goal race of the season. Congratulations. You're in off season for a few weeks, maybe a month. You go into maintenance or base building
Yeah.
and you can take some time away from it and then get back into it during base season, base training. And I think it's always a good idea to like evaluate what worked, what didn't work in any training cycle. And that
Yeah.
mindset is going to be a big component to that.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there is a benefit to an athlete who maybe isn't visualizing a lot either before or during their runs, but they are spending time maybe every Sunday? They're journaling about their week of running and they're also kind of visualizing and going through different scenarios that might pop up. Is that still beneficial to that
Yeah.
athlete?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So it doesn't have to look one way by any
Hmm.
means. That if what you have in your, like, if what's realistic for you and what works for you is to do it once a week, then that's what you do, and that's enough. Like it is okay, because there will be people that will say like, no, you have to be doing it daily if you really want the benefit. But we also have to be realistic with our lives and our bandwidth and what is what time is available to us and what works for us. Because I have some athletes that, for some people, this comes very naturally. Like some people will tell me that they already sort of see everything in images, right? Or if you just think about journaling and you're writing something down, and if you imagine doing that and you're like, oh yeah, when I'm journaling, I see everything that I'm writing down, then it might be that like you just are a visual thinker and that comes really
Yeah.
naturally. And this might be a great tool for you. For other athletes, it does not come natural. It doesn't come natural to me. I have to
Yeah.
work on that skill. So it might be like there might be a decision there of like, okay, I want to utilize visualization in this way because it does take me more energy to do that than someone where it comes naturally. And what are the other tools that really resonate with me and work really well? So maybe I only do visualization for specific aspects of my performance, and then I use other mental training tools to fill in other areas that I need to work on.
Absolutely. And do you see like visualization taking place? You mentioned something about daily. Like, does it still serve its purpose on easy and recovery runs versus like long runs and workouts?
Yeah, so with the recovery piece, sometimes the way you can use visualization is actually imagining your muscles recovering, right? Like getting
Yeah.
really, because I use it with my injured athletes too, of like seeing the body, whatever the injury is, like see the muscle fibers, regenerating and growing back, or like there's just different fun ways you can use it. So you can use it for those recovery days too, and use it in that way, or just imagining, using visualization to imagine one of your you know favorite places where you feel the most relaxed and actually bring it in as part of your sort of active recovery, where
Mm.
you're engaging your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the relaxation response to help counter all of the stress response that you've been especially at the end of like a really big training block. Like, how do we help the body recover by engaging the parasympathetic nervous system? And visualization is a great tool for that as well.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I think it's like, again, like for an athlete, reviewing what you need to work on, like the things that maybe haven't worked in 2025, and how do you want to show up in 2026, and deciding, let's just start this way, X way of maybe it's visualizing getting out the door at night. I'm going to use this in my personal life because offline before we
That's right.
recorded, we were talking about holiday plans, and we're recording this before 2026, and I'm like, oh gosh, I have something to do tonight that I get to do tonight, and I'm very excited
Nice.
about it. And I'm also very tired from holidaying. And I'm going to visualize like how I want to show up
Right.
tonight and how great it's going to be. So I think, it definitely can serve its purpose when you're looking for that motivation, that inspiration to get out the door, especially during these winter months when it's cold, it's windy, it's icy. But then, like, how do we want to visualize in our workouts, in our long runs? I love the idea of on recovery days of like visualizing your body kind of like reforming itself and rebuilding itself into this
Hmm.
really strong runner, because essentially that's what recovery runs are for. We should be running them quote unquote slow enough that we are recovering through the run so we feel a little bit better than when we started. I think anytime we go into a recovery run, which is a day after a workout or a long run, and we feel worse than when we started, that is not it. That's not how we want to feel. So we really want to be able to visualize it. Have you ever had athletes kind of flip this around and use it in their race and visualize maybe something in their training to get them through race day? Because I ran the Chicago Marathon a few months ago, and there was about 7K to go and 8K to go, and my stomach kind of went out on me and I was not feeling well. I was
Uh,
like, and I was running really well up until that point. And I put myself back on a 1K loop that I run in Boulder all the time, where I feel really strong. I feel really confident on this loop.
hmm.
And Chicago crowds, the streets, everything went away. And I was back in Boulder running on this 1K loop. And I just told myself and repeated myself, like, you just have 8 of these to run. You have done this so many times. You can do this. Like, how much value is there for athletes to use that on race day? But also, like, how do they kind of tap into that?
Yeah, I think that's a great application of it, right? Like if you're in the middle of a race and you're starting to, and something it like is eating at you, you're starting to doubt your ability or doubt your confidence, or you're just struggling, that's a great moment where you can come to, like, use visualization and think about a time where you feel really strong and confident, but like a specific event or a specific, in your case, like a specific area that you run, and like, oh, it's
Hmm.
just like that. Like I'm just running, right? That's all that's happening here.
Hmm.
And to help you, it helps to shift your emotional state of like, oh, that's right. That, because if when you think about like daydreaming, right? Like the, just to kind of demonstrate like the power of our, like our mind to be able to influence our emotions. Sometimes when we're daydreaming, you might like be thinking about some scenario and all of a sudden you're laughing out loud and you're like chuck, and it's like it's not actually happening, right? Like that, but
Right.
you shifted your emotional state. Or you might have had the opposite where you're like thinking about something and it's like an intrusive thought and suddenly you're getting teary and you're like, "Oh my, that's not happening. Everything's okay." Like, so it really is very powerful for shifting our emotional state. So in the middle of a race like that, that was a there were some other things you did too that helped in that scenario. So but it started with that visualization and shifting the emotion so that you then can think about like, I just need to do this 8 more times. So that thought does psychologically does something where we call it establishing an end, right? So sometimes like the brain and body are working together to allocate resources and energy output. So if the brain thinks, dear God, how am I going to finish this race? Your body starts to slow down, even if you're physically capable, right? Because the brain's in charge of the safety of the body. So it's like, oh, we better slow down. I don't know if we can do that. Like, how much longer can we do this? We better reserve some energy resources, right? So by
Yeah.
saying to yourself, like, I just need to do this 8 times, now it's like, oh, yeah, I can do that. Instead of thinking, like, it just is a reframe in the brain that helps the brain go, oh, yeah, I got this. I've done this before. Instead of like, oh, dear God, how am I going to do this? Right. So there's a few things you did that worked really well in that scenario, but it started with that, like, it was such a great instinct to just go, you know what? I'm just running that loop. That's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, it's like a very calming feeling. So for anyone that wants to try it in their next training or their next race, highly, highly recommend. And like, I am a loop runner, right? So loops for me is very calming, like means to an end of like, I know I can get through this. I've done this often. And a lot of times in Boulder too, when you're running like a long tempo workout, you're running loops, whether it's a mile, okay,
Right.
a mile, 2.5 miles, like that's just what we have here. And so it does kind of micro chunk out the rest of the race or whatever period of time that you're in to kind of create that like tangible, or it's like a feasible, like I can do this rather than,
Yeah,
oh my
that's right.
gosh, it's like mile 2021. This is the hardest part of the race. How am I going to actually finish this and pull off, a PR or something like that? Now, does visualization look different for a novice runner to an intermediate to an advanced runner, or is it all kind of the same?
In terms of what you would visualize, it might be the same. In terms of how it's utilized, it might be a little different, right? So a novice runner that's just learning the skill or just like applying it, it might look, what you choose to use it for might look a little different than a really seasoned runner where visualization is like very much internalized into the training plan, and there's sort of a systemized way to utilize it. So in terms of like what you visualize, that's very much tailored to each individual athlete in terms of what they're working on and what they need. So in that way, it might be a little bit different
Mhm.
from a very beginning runner versus a really seasoned runner where like it's your first event ever, like it's your first half marathon ever, your first marathon ever. A novice runner might be really using the visualization to see themselves crossing that finish line, like to build the belief in your ability to do this and to trust your training plan and trust your body. Whereas
Yeah.
someone that's more seasoned might know, like they have a better sort of finger on the pulse of like where their body's at, what's realistic in this moment, and know what their body's capable of or not capable of on the day. And they might be using it for, they might still use that same type of visualization, but they might also be adding in other types as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just a bit more maybe elevated for an intermediate to advanced runner because they have more experience and they know
Exactly.
their body's a little bit better and they know maybe a bit more of what they need. I know going into my first marathon, And for every first marathon, right? It's like you don't actually run the 26.2 miles. So you like
Right.
have no
That's
idea
right. Yeah.
what happens on the other side of my longest long run. I don't know, but I am here to find out. And I think visualizing, at the very least, running as strong as you can in those last maybe 6 or 7, 8 miles is a great way to lean into that. And that can be during your long run, that can be during easy efforts. Is there any benefit to an athlete who daydreams and maybe it's in tandem with a little bit of visualization, but they also dabble in daydreaming?
Yes. Like as long as, the daydream is not taking you where, you're not sabotaging yourself, right? In the daydream.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, I mean it's like sometimes your brain does go a little rogue and you're
Totally.
seeing
Mine
these, right?
does.
Yeah. And then you just gently bring it back as long as you're like, the neural pathway that's being laid down is the one that's like, because your brain's listening. So that's the tricky part is like your brain is listening. So we need to be thoughtful about the input that we're giving it because it's like an information processor. And so if you kind of equate it to like, right, chat GPT or like these, your brain creates its own algorithms, so to speak, right? And so whatever you repeat in your brain, it's going to hold on to that more strongly. So if you're doing visualization and you're like, oh my gosh, every time I do this, I'm sabotaging myself. Well, that's in the algorithm, right? Like your brain is listening. So you really want to be thoughtful about the input, like about what you're telling yourself and what you're imagining because your brain is listening.
Yeah. So it's not one specific way of only visualizing maybe positive things, cues, outcomes, feelings, etc. On the flip side, it's not only visualizing what the worst that could happen in
That's
all
right.
these different ways. It's blending the two together to make sure that you're well balanced because I am very guilty of daydreaming when I run. It's all very positive. Anytime my heart rate spikes, it's probably because I'm like visualizing myself running sub 3 in the marathon. Like this legit happens
Yeah.
on a lot of my easy days.
That's great.
And but I also know that I have to like prepare myself for those situations in the race where maybe I run into another runner because they stop on the course because they
Hmm.
need assistance, or I'm running the Indianapolis Marathon and the roads are crap and you're just like trying to like get around all the potholes, like whatever it may be. I think it's really good to balance both sides of the spectrum there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's okay to get playful with your
Yes.
visualization too, right? Like with the potholes, right? Like now I'm pretending that I'm
My
in a
trail
game of
running.
Frogger and I like this is fun, right? Instead of like this is ridiculous and why don't they fix the roads, right? To just you can get playful with because again, it's like creating that levity is going to shift your emotional state and just across the board, we know that like when you're experiencing more facilitative emotions, you perform better. So like, how do we make sure we like, let's get playful with it. Like, oh, now I'm in a game of Frogger and now this is another challenge or another goal I can set for myself. Like, how many potholes can I, expertly navigate during this race?
Totally. And I love Indy. I think it's great, but everyone on this podcast knows my feelings on the road conditions and I really hope they change it soon. But yeah, I mean, I think, to that end of like maybe it is a course where the roads are a little bit rough and you have to navigate around. Like I'm in kind of this season of like I have access to trails, so like running a trail
Mm-hmm.
run at least once a week and really getting and being like really playful and fun with how I'm running the technicality of the trail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely paying off because last week I was running with a friend and it's been really windy here and there was a pretty big tree branch that had fallen, and instead of running around it I basically like leaped over it and she was like,
Like a hurdle.
my gosh. I'm like, it's all that trail running, girl. Like, I don't even
That's
know.
great.
But like, it's like you're preparing yourself in these fun ways. Like if I were to run Indianapolis, in the fall, like I'm ready to go in that way. And I can put my mind maybe back on those trails if
Mm-hmm.
I am in that racing situation where I'm like, oh, wow, like the roads have really, just taken a turn over the last 2 years since I've been here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it gets to be a lot of fun. And I
It
love
can be
that.
fun. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then you get there and you'd be like, oh, I trail run. I could do this.
Yeah, totally,
This is
totally,
nothing.
totally. Absolutely. Now, is there any difference between, let's say, the distance that an athlete is running? Is there any difference in how they, daydream or how they visualize if you're a miler all the way up to an ultra marathoner, or is it all the same?
What you visualize might be a little bit different
Yeah.
when you're running longer distances, right? Because you're not going to, imagine the entire thing. So then you might be looking at, oh, well, what are the places, like, what are those critical moments, or where are the places where I think maybe I would struggle or start to doubt myself? And those might be moments you could get really specific with visualizing. So is it like, there's a certain climb in the marathon that you're like, oh my God, everybody talks about this climb and like it's going to be awful. That's like if you've never done it or you have done it and oh my God, this climb is so awful, right? Like, so to know, if like, oh, I struggle on climbs, it's not my favorite thing to run. And I know there's a big one and that's going to be a place where I start to doubt myself, especially if I get passed by someone, then that's what you want to visualize. You want to visualize like, oh, I'm going to see myself feeling really strong and confident and see someone pass me and still maintaining my feelings of strength and confidence. Like, it doesn't matter what they're doing, what their goals are, their business. What am I working on right now? And that's another one you can do
Yeah.
some levity with too for my athletes that don't enjoy hill running or hill repeats or climbing, is to just play with
Yeah.
like, man, I'm so stoked that this climb is here. I was really hoping the entire thing was uphill. Like, I'm so happy. You just like get playful with it because that shifts the emotional state.
Yeah, I think anytime that we're in like a more positive mindset, or like I've talked a lot about smiling during training or hard workouts or racing, it changes everything instantly. Or even telling yourself like you're okay. I recently ran a 5K time trial just to kind of test my fitness, and it kind of turned into that. But I told myself as I was getting into it, like, you're okay. This is going to be great. Everything's going to be fine. And that immediately made everything like cool, calm, relaxed, and I got it done. So I think there's a lot of validity to there's some words you don't say on a podcast. That's one of them for me. To staying positive and also making sure that you're doing yourself justice by being honest with what you need. So I love that tandem of like the hill example of not just running a strong hill, but you're also visualizing that runner that might come up next to you who's running faster than you,
Hmm.
that could ultimately crush your confidence. But
Right.
instead, you stay focused on what you're doing
Yeah.
and getting up that hill. Now, is there any benefit to a runner who maybe has access to, let's say, their hilly half marathon course, and it's local to them so they can get on it and they can run
Mm.
their long runs on that same course? I'm assuming there's a lot of like really great positive feedback if they were to visualize them racing on that actual course.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
To be able, I mean, like to be able to recreate the image in your mind of the actual spot, like, and like, oh,
Mhm.
that's right, there's that tree there, and there's this landmark and that landmark, and be able to see it really clearly can be really helpful. It's not necessary, right? Like, a lot of times you're going to
Yeah.
be doing a race and it's your first time doing the race, and you don't have an
Yeah.
opportunity to get out there. And in that scenario, sometimes I'll have people like see if anyone has any like Google Pro visuals, or like, does anybody have any images of the course that you can look at and then bring that into your visualization? So when you can do that, it can be really helpful. It's not necessary, but like if that opportunity is available to you, I would definitely take it.
Yeah, and like a lot of athletes have given me feedback of like they have, gone on YouTube and they've, quote unquote drove the course on
Yeah,
YouTube
that's right.
versus actually getting in their car and driving the course the day before a race. And I think that has a lot of benefits to it. And then of course we have the tools and technology now of jumping on a treadmill and you are
Right.
feeling and maybe also visually seeing the New York City Marathon course or the
Hmm.
Boston course or some of these bigger races, and I think that can have a lot of benefit too.
Yeah, yeah. As long as like you're prepared for if it looks different, I'm okay, right? So we don't want the brain to kind of get fixated on anything and expect something, and then when you get there, go, wait a minute, this isn't what it was supposed to be. Like, it can trip
Totally.
the brain up. So know that like that doing that can be really helpful, but also know at the same time, like, no matter what, I'm ready for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so powerful. And I love the idea of starting out with what do you need to work on more of a process level? Is it the motivation, the consistency, the evening runs, the evening workouts, maybe the early morning
Yep,
winter runs, right?
that's right.
Start there and then build into it. And maybe you eventually get to visualizing yourself on race day and how you want to feel and how you want to look. I've also heard there's a lot of benefits to like visualizing yourself running and how you want to feel and how you want to look, not just on race day, but also in training or on some of those bigger workouts and long runs.
Yeah, yeah. Like training is a great opportunity to practice some of your visualization, right? So, like taking the opportunity to do some visualization of like, and you can be thinking about like if you're changing something in your form or, so, like you can also utilize it to work very specifically on the execution of the motor skill that you're working on. So there's so many different ways that you can use it that it's but you do want to practice. And yeah, like the motivation piece, that's a great place to practice of like if you're someone that's like, I'm really struggling to get up in the morning, it's dark, it's cold, I don't want to do this, like even the night before, closing your eyes and imagining yourself like the alarm goes off, you're feeling excited, refreshed, you see yourself getting your gear on, you see yourself going out the door and you see yourself out there running. Like you're planting those seeds and then it's almost like you've created the path and now you just need to walk down the path. So that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I love that so much. And it really just opens the door up for so much potential and possibility and breakthrough in running. And I think we could all use some of that as we head into the new year. Is there anything that we didn't get to talk about today or dive deeper into that you wanted to, Carrie?
I think the only other thing to know or to kind of keep in mind with visualization is the timing of it before a race. So for some of my athletes, like if you doing visualization in any way causes you to feel stress or anxiety, don't do it. Like you need to work on the skill of it, or that might not be the mental skill for you, and that's okay. So
Yeah.
because it's such a powerful tool, you don't, so sometimes I'll have athletes that like they don't want to use visualization the morning of a race because they're concerned about their ability to control the images or just like, or it feels like pressure thinking about the race too intensely, right? Whereas
Yeah.
other athletes are like, no, I love doing it. That like, so you kind of, that's again coming back to your operating system and knowing like, if just to know that in general, like if doing the visualization the night before or the morning of causes any kind of anxiety or stress, don't do it. Like, then that's not part of your pre performance plan. There are other things you can do to help you get into your optimal emotional state. And it sounds like maybe those tools might be better suited to you than using visualization.
Absolutely. I mean, Emily Saul has been on the podcast and she's incredible. She has like a race morning meditation routine. And
Hmm.
that's more my vibe. It's like,
Yeah,
hey, I've done all the visualization I can in training. It's going to taper down in the taper with me.
that's
And
right.
now we're
Yeah.
going to like really be zen, be as confident as possible, excited. Also, nerves are part of it.
Hmm.
And it could also mean like you're putting a hoodie on, you're putting sunglasses on, and you're kind of blocking out, especially if you're running a big race, all the extra noise around you. Like there can be so many things that you can do to set yourself up for success. I think, like you've mentioned throughout this entire episode, a lot of it does come down to individualization and what's going to work best for you. And I think 2026 is a great year to dive into that and see what's going to work
Yeah.
best for you and what's going to elevate you and create like the strongest version of you. And that's really exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Carrie, for your time today. I really
Yes.
appreciate you. And cheers to a new year. Happy New Year.
Yes. Happy New Year.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again next week.